Nebular hypothesis of Laplace regarding the origin of the Earth. Laplace, a French scientist, propounded his hypothesis in 1796 through his book entitled Exposition of the World System. According to him, the primordial matter existed in the form of intensely hot and rotating gaseous matter in the beginning. This hot and rotating gaseous mass has been named as nebula, and hence the name of the theory as nebula theory. As this nebular mass cooled, its volume decreased and its velocity of rotation increased. This nebular mass then began to shift around the equator. The increase in rotation resulted in the increase in the centrifugal force, which pulled the mass away from the center. This process was continued and a stage was reached when the centrifugal force became equal to the gravitational force. At this stage, the excess matter around the equator separated from the equator of the nebula in the shape of the ring and became weightless. With the passage of time, the nebula further cooled down and resulted in decrease in volume and increase in rotation as well as in centrifugal force. When the centrifugal force exceeded the gravitational force, the ring moved away from the nebula and broke into many smaller rings. These rings became planets and subplanets, that is, satellite. On cooling, the central part of the nebula which remained behind is our present sun. Now, what are the merits of the nebular hypothesis of Laplace? First, same plane of planets. All the planets of the solar system revolve around the sun in the same plane. Laplace explained that the planets must move in the same plane because they have been formed from one ring only. Second merit is rotation and revolution of the planets explained. This hypothesis clearly explains the rotation and revolution of the planets and satellites. Laplace explained that the nebula and the ring from which the planets and satellites were formed was moving, and hence these heavenly bodies must also move. Third merit, hot interior. According to this hypothesis, all the planets were hot and in molten state in the beginning. They took their present solid state after cooling. The outer crust of the planet was the first to cool and take solid shape. Their interiors are still hot and in molten state. The study of interior of the earth proves it. Same element in composition, that is the fourth merit. Since all planets are supposed to be made from a single ring, they must be composed of the same elements. This proves the Laplace hypothesis. Now we will talk about the demerits of the nebular hypothesis of Laplace. Laplace's hypothesis enjoyed acceptance for about a century, but nowadays it is widely criticized due to new scientific inventions. Following some of the objections raised against this hypothesis. First, no sequence of size of the planets. If the planets have been formed out of the ring which got separated from the parent nebula, there should be some sequence in size of the planets. In other words, the size of the planet should gradually increase or decrease, but this is not so. Starting from Mercury, the size of the planets increase up to Jupiter and thereafter it decreases up to Pluto. This is against Laplace's hypothesis. Second, planets cannot be formed from rings. Laplace did not explain how the parts of the ring solidified into spherical planets. According to Moulton, the rings should disintegrate into small particles and disappear into space as per laws of dynamics. Third, inclination of planes. According to Laplace's ideas, the plane of orbit of the planet should be parallel to the plane of Sun's equator. but W.M. Smart has pointed out that there is an angle of 6 degrees between these two planets. Fourth, no bulge in the present Sun. If the present Sun is the remaining part of the original nebula, the process of ring formation should continue and there should be a bulge at the equator of the present Sun, indicating that another ring is in offing, but unfortunately for Laplace, there is no bulge in the Sun. Fifth, the ring should break down. Laplace took inspiration for his hypothesis from the rings of the Saturn, but this proved a drawback for him. According to James Clerk Maxwell, even if the ring is formed, it cannot condense into a planet. According to Kepler's law, there would be different angular velocity in different segments of the ring, which will lead to its disintegration. Sixth, against kinetic theory of gases. According to this theory, the gas particles have 6-dimensional motion, which creates hindrance in condensation and solidification. Consequently, the ring should disintegrate and disappear into space rather than forming planets. Why only one ring? Scientists have asked Laplace why only one ring has separated from nebula. The process of ring formation should have continued and several rings should have formed. Why only 9 planets? It is also not clear why the ring broke into only 9 planets. It can be mathematically proved that the ring will disintegrate into numerous small meteors. The formation of such big planets as Jupiter and Saturn can in no way be explained by this hypothesis. Ninth, against the principle of conservation of angular momentum. According to Laplace's hypothesis, the angular momentum of the initial nebula should be equal to the angular momentum of the solar system. Angular momentum is related to mass and velocity. Some mass is equals to about 99% of the whole of the solar system, while its angular momentum is only 2% of the solar system. This is against the principle of angular momentum and also against the Laplace nebular theory. 10th, opposite revolution not explained. Laplace asserts that all the planets were formed from one ring. Therefore, all the planets and their subplanets should move in the same direction. But some of the subplanets of Saturn and Uranus revolve in opposite direction. This is not explained in Laplace's hypothesis. Planets like Uranus and Pluto have also retrograde motion, slow motion of the Sun. If the Sun and its planets have been formed from the nebula, then the motion of the Sun should be several hundred times more than its present motion. The Sun should move much faster than the planets, but the fact is that Sun's motion is much slower than estimated by Laplace theory. 12th, age of the Sun. Laplace explained that the Sun is about 4 billion years old and the initial nebula spread over the whole space of the solar system. Scientists open that the Sun cannot contract in its present size in such a small period of time. Rock's modification in Laplace hypothesis. So friends, as you have seen that the Laplace nebular theory has much more demerits than its merits, hence it has been condemned by many of the scientists and recent studies. Now we will move on to the Rock's modification in Laplace hypothesis. Rock was a French scientist who presented a modified version of Laplace ideas. According to him, there was not only one ring as suggested by Laplace, instead there were 9 rings separated from the nebula, one after the another. These rings on cooling became planets. Rock imagined that the parent nebula occupied the whole space of the present solar system. Such a huge nebula can have only low density. Under these circumstances, a big and thick ring cannot separate it out of a nebula with such a low density. Hence, there should be many rings instead of wondering. So, this is all about the nebular theory of Laplace, which is now discriminated or condemned by many scientists and new studies. For further audiobooks, please subscribe to our channel and hit the like button. Thank you. We will meet soon in the next video.